Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Legends podcast with Sarah Faruya Coaching. I'm Sarah Faruya, and with me today is Jane Best. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Sarah.
We're actually recording this in her bedroom in her beautiful house. We're trying to be a meter apart. And we have a cat in the house as well, so it could be that we have a little visitor who comes in today. I believe that everybody has stories and I want to hear them and tell them, and that there are many, many ways to lead a life. And boy, do we have a fascinating story for you today in Jane's story. But before we get into it, a little bit about Jane. So Jane was born and raised in England in the UK, and she started out as a lecturer and course tutor, and in, what was it, Jane?
In Zambia, you mean?
Zambia?
Yes.
Okay, so in Zambia, yes, under the Voluntary Services Overseas scheme, after having studied cooking?
Probably it was called institutional management.
Institutional management.
So hospitality management.
Hospitality
basically.
management, I've got it. She then went on to live back in the UK for a while, working at Mount Vernon Hospital as the assistant catering manager. She then moved on to John Lewis PLC in Milton Keynes as the restaurant manager, before moving to Tokyo, where she was an English teacher and then an international school representative for United Publishers Services in Tokyo. Then she co-owned an English restaurant called 1066 with her husband. It was called Best Cook as well, their company. She published a book, which me and my husband are very happy to have a copy of. And for the last 10 plus years, she has been working for Refugees International Japan, which recently changed its name to Refugees Empowerment International, RE, and which also coincides with the era we're here in Japan we're in, which is called Reiwa, which is just a lovely coincidence for us. I'm on the board of directors of RE as well, so it's really great for me to be able to welcome Jane here today. It's very strange doing this recording like this, isn't it? Sat in her bedroom. There's a beautiful view outside. Jane lives next to the most amazing river. Absolutely gorgeous, and it's November 2020, so we're in autumn here, and it's just glorious. All the leaves are changing. It's month 10 of the coronavirus, just in case.
So yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is why we're kind of strangely distant from one another, yet cozied up in her bedroom. So let's get into it. Jane, tell me all about your upbringing, your ancestry and your childhood.
There's Welsh there,
Mm-hmm.
and English.
Yeah.
My mother was from a Tadcaster family in Yorkshire, and my father was from the valleys in Wales.
Oh.
And they met in London, which is where I was born. Very soon after that, when I was about 3, we moved down to West Sussex. Well, it was Sussex then. It's now West Sussex. And we moved into this bungalow beside the sea.
Lovely.
Literally 100 yards from the beach. And that's where I grew up. Went to school. My family still live in the area. Not in the same village anymore, but it was beautiful. I mean, the beach, and I was really into horses, and so I spent a lot of my teenage years riding, and so you could ride on the beach, and be behind, north of the village, was the South Downs, which are just beautiful. I mean, to ride and gallop across these strangely called downs, but they're ups.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I wonder where the etymology of that word comes from. I have no idea.
No.
I bet your husband knows.
Yes, he's very good on trivia.
Yeah. Brilliant. So what was the influence then of your life? To describe to me a childhood of what year are we talking, or what years are we talking, what era?
Well, it was the 60s and 70s, and it was great.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic time to be growing up. I always celebrate that.
Yeah.
It was lovely. Lots of new things were happening, and yeah, great music, marches. When I became a student, loved all that. So it was a really exciting time to grow up. I didn't realize at the time how much it was still post-war, if you like. Apparently well, obviously not apparently, rations were still in place when I was born. And of course I wasn't aware of that at all. But so it was a very happy, easy childhood, no frills. And as I say, you know, the summer we were always down on the beach. I don't remember learning to swim. It felt as if I could always swim, you know. And I went to the village school. It was a village, but it wasn't as parochial as that sounds, because it was quite big in terms, and quite a lot of second houses, and quite a lot of commuter. It was just an hour and a half from London. And so there wasn't a village community. Like I listened to Steve, my husband, and go to the village where they came from. Very much, they know everybody there.
Yeah.
We really didn't know that many people in the village. It was kind of a little bit distant from that angle, but then of course, Southerners, they tend to be a bit distant, don't they? You Northerners think that.
Yeah, well, that's what, yeah, we always say that. Yeah, I suppose there's this north-south thing. It's the opposite here in Japan, isn't it? Where the like people from like Osaka and so on, people from the West are considered to be more kind of friendly and down to earth. But it's interesting. Yeah, well, I'm from up north as well, obviously, so I'm going to be like, yeah, we're much more friendly.
Well, but I did find that when I went up north later on,
yes,
I did find that people were friendlier.
Yes,
or are friendlier.
Yes.
Certainly, I think that's quite true.
Yeah.
Anyways.
In my last interview, the woman I interviewed was talking about Liverpool and how she lived in Liverpool, and she's from London. And she said she just loved it. She loved how friendly everybody was, and she had what she called her Liverpool smile. She'd come back down with. So it's interesting you should say that. So just that, where's Sussex in relation to London?
Pretty directly south.
Directly south.
Yeah, it's probably not exactly direct, but
yes,
it's pretty
more
much
or less.
So. Yeah,
yeah.
Brighton is the best known. Which now it's split into west and east. Brighton is in East Sussex.
Yeah.
But that Brighton was 15 miles, which would be about 20 kilometers east of where I was, near Worthing.
So you really experienced the kind of the energies of the 60s and 70s then as a teenager and a woman in your 20s. What was that like then? So you said you were on marches. I remember you telling me, because we went to Fuji Rock together and we watched Ray Davies band.
Yes.
I remember you telling me you'd seen him when you were 19, when he was in, what was his band called?
The Kinks.
The Kinks, of course.
Glad I knew that one.
I'm the one who's going. I'm the one who's going a bit potty already.
Yes. Worthing Town Hall, which now sounds so very small town, which I guess it was in many ways, but that was our entertainment. That was the time of youth clubs and things.
Yes,
and people went to them.
That. It was brilliant.
And Worthing Town Hall, or maybe once a month, but it was Thursdays, had some great bands, and the Kinks played there. And I remember going to see the Trogs, and I can't think of all the others now. Yeah, but yes, that's where I saw them. And kind of funny, because I was probably mid-teens then, so I was only about 14, 15, and my father would insist on picking me up at 10 o'clock. Yeah, it was very embarrassing. But I can see why he did it. Yeah, I can see why they did it now as well. But then, I think we're really lucky, actually. I mean, for you even more so, maybe being a few years older than me, just how much freedom we had when we were young, and how much we could just, you were put out, went off and did what you did, and then came home, and then went out again, and it was just so much fun. It was so much fun. We were out all the time. I don't remember learning to swim either, because I was raised by the seaside too. What do you think that influence had on you living by the sea? Do you have any ideas? Because I feel so strongly influenced by having lived by the sea. Well, the biggest influence is I do not particularly enjoy living in the city. And I did live in the city here in Tokyo for years and years. So yeah, the love of the outdoors, and I think that is the biggest influence it had on me. But yes, it was very free, you're right. Not that it's not free now, but it was so, obviously before everything got a little bit more complicated, you could just go out on your bike and cycle around the village.
Yeah.
And that, you know, even before I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And I used to walk to school.
Same.
It was, I think it was 3 miles to the primary school, and I used to walk there.
How long did that take you? About an hour?
I suppose so. No, I don't know. I don't remember.
No.
About 40 minutes, I suppose.
Okay.
But I have this really funny memory, and I guess that's what these sort of interviews are about. I do remember that I used to dream, and I was a big dreamer, daydreamer. And I do remember walking to school and imagining that there was somebody secretly filming me behind the trees to do a film of my life later. Now, where on earth did that come from? And why would I even think about that?
Well, it's coming true right now.
But it's such an abiding memory. I don't remember lots about school, but I do remember that walk to school.
I just love that. And you imagine, like, so wow, that's like the Truman Show or something like that.
Well, but it's incredible
fantasy.
Well, and I was really shy. So why would I even want? I suppose that was my way out of being shy.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's fantastic. I love that. I've just got goosebumps all over my body thinking about that. Like, what an amazing fantasy.
So bizarre.
Yeah. Daydream. I was a daydreamer as well. Goodness me. And I wasn't shy at all, as you can imagine, but just a daydreamer. And I did love being on my own. I just loved being on my own, and I still do, actually. That's why I took an hour just to sit on my own in the room before. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but I just really love being on my own. I love being in company too, but that's not something that I feel really strongly about. I love that fantasy, Jane. That's amazing. And you said also that, you know, things became more complicated. What do you mean by that? Before things became more complicated?
Well, in worrying about, you know, where the children are going now, and checking on them quite rightly. And so it was, yeah. It's a bit trite to say halcyon days, because obviously the word danger is around, of course, but it just was much easier to just get on your bike and cycle.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? There was a turning point there. Maybe it was just the proliferation of media and the just more access. I suppose when you're just reading the paper, there doesn't feel like there's that ever-present danger, but when it's constantly coming at you, sensationalist stories about all kinds of things, and again, like you said, rightly so, keeping people safe and so on. Yeah, I feel so incredibly happy and blessed that I had that kind of childhood. You know?
Yes.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So then 60s and 70s, and then you went to college, and you said you did marches and stuff as well. So tell us about that, and why did you choose to do the hospitality business as what happened next? Well, yeah. And if there's any more gems of stories like the one you just told me, please bring them on.
Yeah, well, they'll come as we're talking, probably. I don't always stay with me. Well, as I say, I was really shy, and I know that I was, you know, my peers would laugh at me or, you know, make fun of me. It's a very mild form of bullying, which wasn't very harmful. And then when I went into the sixth form, I discovered debating and did, you know, research and so on for presenting your case in a debate, and suddenly I discovered I had something to say. And I've not stopped since. No,
that's true. And
you
thank goodness
and lots
for
of
you.
People know.
Yes.
So why did I decide? I loved the sixth form. I had all sorts of opportunities apart from the debating, and I was a bit of a not goody because I actually was quite naughty sometimes. Yeah, but I became head of prefects and that sort of thing, and that's where the sort of leadership came in. Yeah, and I probably didn't study as hard as I should have done.
I hear you.
And therefore I wasn't likely to. I wasn't inclined to go to university, and I didn't make the grades. I remember one of the books in my A-levels, I think it was Great Expectations, and I never read it. I watched it on TV. Isn't that a terrible confession?
It's not, you know, because No, I did my GCSEs. To this day, I haven't read To Kill a Mockingbird cover to cover.
Right.
I got an A in every English exam I
Oh
ever
wow,
did.
no, I didn't get,
Yeah.
I got the grades in things like maths and so on, which was
Okay.
very, very odd, but yeah. So what did I do with the grades? And I wanted to do something with people. By this stage, you know, I was getting into socializing rather than being shy. And it, you know, it was very much influenced by the counterculture that was coming down from London. You know, we were so close to London, and so it was all. It went from mods and rockers. It then went into drugs and that, you know, the music scene. Amazingly, I didn't take any drugs, but my friends were heavily into that. So that was all part of actually not studying hard enough in the sixth form. And somebody talked to me about the catering world, the hospitality world. So that's why, and strangely, my grandmother, who was living in Wales, still living in Wales then, she told me about this college in Cardiff. So that's how I sort of ended up there, through not actually doing enough about it. I think that's probably the best way to explain it.
You're already kind of working your connections there.
Yes, yeah. So I went to this college, which turned out to be, well, it was mostly, I think there were 2 men, and I'd been at a mixed school, so I found that quite not the change I would have wanted. But our college was also part of, all the students were part of the University College Students' Union. So that was fantastic, because that opened up all these avenues for socializing. Again, the music, we had some great bands. I always remember a friend saying that, who was it? One of the bands, they played for a crate of Newcastle Brown and their expenses or something. And it was just, yeah. The bands weren't charging as much then, because they're all, you know, getting onto the scene. So, and then of course, yes, marches and demonstrations. It was a time of questioning. It was building, and it was getting quite exciting. So
what were the marches and demos about at that time? What was the
CND?
CND. What's that mean?
Ban the bomb. It was
campaign for nuclear disarmament.
Ban the bomb.
Greenham Common.
Yes.
So that was very strong during the. Was that in the 70s then, or I remember that in the 80s.
Well, yeah, it definitely started in the 70s.
Yeah, 70s and 80s. So that was the campaign for nuclear disarmament. Okay, yeah.
My favourite march. My favourite march was Thatcher, the milk snatcher.
Oh yeah, because
she was taking away school milk when she was education minister. So yeah, I got very involved in student politics, and I was social secretary in my second year, and then I became student president in my third year. And what was very interesting, it sounds grander than it was, because it was quite a small all-women's college, and it wasn't, the college itself was not very political. But I had friends at the University Union, so that's how I sort of got more involved in that. But you know what, I discovered that if you, going back to the debating society, I discovered if you've got your facts and you present them, you can win your case. Not always, but you can generally win your case. And I remember one incident at college. It was still early, and so they weren't allowing men into the hostels, hostels, even just for visiting in the common rooms. And all my predecessor said, "Oh no, the authorities really won't allow that. You won't get it." And I thought, well, we got to try. And I got all my arguments up to go to the principal with the student committee. And I presented my argument, and the principal just looked at me and said, "I didn't know all that. I think we'll change it immediately." And I was completely deflated.
Because you were helping for a good debate.
I was all built up to this argument, and people just hadn't tried before. So there was nothing amazing at all. It was just prepared to speak.
Oh, isn't that funny? I have an incident like that with my husband, and I was going to tell him that I was going to leave my job. So this is back in 2012, and I'd got myself all geared up for all the different things that might happen. And I said, okay, I'm going to leave my job. And he goes, okay. And I said, okay. And he goes, yeah. And I said, okay. And I said, well, I'm also planning to fly to New York to go to this conference there the day after I quit my job. And he goes, all right. And he goes, how much is it? And I went, it's $2,000. And he goes, okay. And I was waiting, you know, that tension's there. Yes. And he goes, okay, I'll pay for it. And I was like, thank you. I was so happy. But there was the same thing, this weird tension inside me. Like I was expecting, and then I think I actually created a row just because I had this weird, like argumentative tension in me. Aren't we odd?
It's an anticlimax too, because you're all built up for it. So yeah.
Anyway, shout out to Kay for paying for my ticket to that conference. That's brilliant. When you were, by the time you got to college, you were kind of over your shyness, is that right?
Yeah.
You just really enjoyed, because
I mean, it still comes out slightly at odd times, if you know.
Do you know what
that's
about?
Ease.
Do you know what shyness is? Like why you were so shy when you were young, or is it just in your nature?
I had rather a strong mother, a little bit sort of domineering. She was great. I mean, we didn't have any problems with her, but I think probably I used to be a bit embarrassed by her.
Okay.
Speaking her mind too much and complaining in shops or something.
Okay.
I mean, not that she was always complaining at all, but she tended to say what she thought, and I think I was just embarrassed by that.
Interesting.
I mean, there's probably a psychologist will find all sorts of other reasons, but that was what I think was the most. Yeah, there were all sorts of things. Like my sister and I are quite different, and she was always the loving one, and Jane doesn't show her emotions, and so I'd always get that kind of a comment, and I guess that made me less inclined to show my emotions. And then don't ask Jane that, she knows it all, she's too clever, and I didn't want to be classed as being clever. I'm sure I wasn't either. It was just maybe I knew some things that my mother didn't because I done better at schools and everything. So I think though that sort of mixture of things affected me as a teenager.
And then kind of just emerged from it when you found the debating society. That's where you literally found your voice.
And it wasn't a horrible, unhappy childhood. It wasn't an unpleasant thing or anything. But it was very definitely there.
Yes. And your mum had a very long life as well, didn't she?
Yes, she died at 93.
93, golly.
Which was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I remember it well. So you're at college, you're having this wonderful time. What were you like at college? Were you just like fully engaged in everything?
Yes. I mean, I thought that it was just that life experience, apart from your study, but it is learning about life and socializing. I was away from home. We 4 of us had a flat on our, the second years of college and so on, and it was fun. It was great.
Were you a wild child, a naughty girl, or anything like that, or just fully engaged and enjoying?
What's naughty?
I was naughty.
I
was all the naughties.
I played life as full. I didn't take drugs. That was what was so interesting, because it was a very experimental time, and my friends were very. Some friends, not all of them.
Yes.
Some of them were well into it. It all came out of it. All came out of it fine, which is great. But apart from that, it was. What's the word? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But no, not all of it. Just enjoying it.
Sex, booze, and rock and roll.
Yes. Plenty of booze.
It was last night as well.
Yes.
So we still continue to enjoy our lives fully in that way, don't we? So what happens next then, Jane? What happens when you graduate, and where do you go from there?
Well, I wanted to do something different. I was left a bit at the end of college because I'd been campaigning for our course, which was recognized as degree level, to become a degree. And it was pretty well agreed that that's that the university would take that up and award a degree, but then they postponed it for a few years. So I was left, I hadn't made any plans for what to do next. So I fiddled around. I took temporary jobs through something called Brook Street Bureau, I think it was called. They organise temps.
I've done lots of temping as well, and that really rings a bell.
I think that's what it was called.
Yeah.
I may be wrong.
Yeah.
And so meanwhile, I was thinking, I don't know where this came from. I was interested in going abroad. And I thought I must do it now.
Isn't it funny when we think that when we're like 19 or something, we're like, I've got to do it now before.
Well, I thought if I didn't do it then,
yes,
I would never do it.
Yes.
And that would not, then I'd be disappointed. And I thought, well, you know, I'd like to do it. And if it doesn't suit me, it's fine. You know, I'll find something else. And so while I was temping, I was applying for different jobs. And I applied to voluntary service overseas, VSO. And it eventually got accepted for them, but it was a year later. So I actually got one of my temp jobs was as a telephonist in an accounting company. And one of the partners in the company somehow got chatting to me and said, you're college educated. And obviously my management course had included accounting. So he gave me a job. So I worked in this accountants for 9 months, which was a great experience. I was doing basically incomplete records and working with I was working with the mine clubs in the valleys. Well, I was still in Cardiff here. So, and so I'd go and visit these amazing men who'd been working in the mines all their lives and were, you know, retired off. Lots of them had, pneumoconiosis, whatever the lung disease that comes from the coal pits, and working their records with them, putting them into a proper accounting. It was a great experience. So that's what I did until VSO finally offered me a posting in Zambia.
I see. So let's move on to Zambia then. What happened? Because this is where I kind of pick up your story. Like, I always think of you of living in Africa, and then that, like, I just have this very strong image of you in Africa. So tell me more about this. Tell me all about this.
It was wonderful.
Okay.
I loved every minute of my time in Zambia.
It was the country of Zambia.
Yes.
Yeah. Where's Zambia, by the way? Is that
middle Africa? It's landlocked.
It's landlocked. Okay.
It used to be northern Rhodesia,
okay,
and therefore it was north of Rhodesia, which was Rhodesia then. Obviously now is Zimbabwe. Great climate. It's 5,000 feet, I think that's right, high.
Wow.
And so quite a mild climate. Yeah, and you know, crazy things like hitchhiking around the country. I mean, I've been back to Africa many times since, and I wouldn't hitchhike now.
Yeah.
So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it.
What did you do there?
I was teaching in a hotel school. I was very disappointed in my project. You know, like I lots of students I meet now, you know, going out to change the world, and I was going out to the bush to work with people in the bush. I didn't do that at all, which was actually very good for me, because I learned that that's not really the best way to do things.
Yeah, of course.
Which brings me round to present day. But
so to say more about that, Jane, you had this kind of image that you were going out to this kind of I'm going to use this word purposefully, provocatively. You're going to go out and have this kind of exotic experience, but actually you got that kind of wake up call. Actually, no, this is not my experience. I'm here to be of service to the people here doing the things they do in the way they do it, or what?
Well, to change the world, basically. I was going out to change the world.
Oh,
of course,
I see.
You know.
Yes.
No, it wasn't quite as grand as that, but I was very idealistic.
Yes.
Very idealistic, and it made me more realistic.
In what way?
That's not the way to do things. You're
No.
not going to go out into the bush and change the people there. And that has built up over the years, as you know, learning that the hands-on stuff is not. It's not going to take people on any further.
Jobs. Yeah.
So my project actually was fine for me, and I made quite a lot of it because I wanted to do things. I was there for the experience, and I take my students out onto projects like school meals, looking at school meals, looking at the hospital catering and that sort of thing. So that was really interesting.
Yes.
And thoroughly enjoyed that, and the students. But generally, just discovering the joys of living in an African country, a completely different culture, and learning that some of the things we just don't take for granted, and which is great.
When you say don't take for granted, what do you mean? You have to kind of question all the time in order to understand the culture, or what? Or don't take for granted? What can you tell me more about that?
Well, not having the same material things.
I see.
And you know, I being in the 60s, 70s, it wasn't even that materialistic.
Yes.
My life, but you know, learning that you didn't always have electricity, and
right.
The water didn't always run, and things like that. Culture-wise, yeah, I mean, I remember one day being accused of being a racist by one of the staff in the hotel,
yeah,
through a complete misunderstanding. But I was shocked. How could anybody possibly think that of me?
Yeah, I've been on marches, for goodness sake, and it's
I'm this idealist that would never even consider that.
Yeah.
And that kind of realism, I think, is very good.
Oh well, okay, now I need to have a look at that. Yeah, yeah.
And that everything, that lots of things can be turned around. So that kind of learning experience was great.
Yeah, it's really interesting you should say this, Jane, and it's very timely, I think, for this particular epoch that we're living through at the moment as well. And if anybody's interested in learning more about this kind of thing that we're talking about here, it's still alive and well, that the non-beneficial way of going out into countries is still alive and well, as you probably know from what you do now. But there's a great Instagram feed, if anybody's interested, called No White Saviors, and that really puts under the microscope a lot of some of the things that are being done very, very badly, and really highlights that. And we will talk about this later, the REI, Refugees Empowerment International, and how embedded in the fabric of that is that we are not the white saviors at all.
Definitely.
We just provide the means for people to be the managers of their own projects.
And talking to African friends of mine then,
yes,
I learned so much about the colonial era, and you know, it sort of had this romantic image before you get there and discover what harm was done in the colonial times, and saw what some of my African friends were doing was just fascinating and quite different to anything. I also met not quite a few, one or two of the ANC guys, which African National Congress, and
which was Nelson Mandela was part of that movement. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
does
so
this border with South Africa?
No, there's Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe does,
in between.
Okay, beg your pardon.
But a lot of the ANC guys were in Zambia. I'd say I didn't meet very many of them, but I met one or two, and that was really interesting. Actually, there's another story to this idealism. Having been on those marches as a student and against racism and against South Africa. So I went to Zambia, and I'm never going to go anywhere near South Africa. I'm not going to touch foot on South African soil. And while there in Zambia, obviously meeting, in addition to a variety of people, a lot of them were white settlers, white Africans, if you like. I mean, it's not an expression that would suit. It'll do for this conversation. They were there, they were settled there, and they'd laugh at me. It was almost a pat on the head, and yes, Jane, you'll learn. You know, the Africans can do this and Africans can do that. And quite a few of them had South African roots. And I did learn from listening to them that I haven't been to South Africa. How can I know? And how can I say all these things that, you know, we mustn't touch it, and how can I talk more authoritatively, well, not authoritatively, but with more
credibly,
knowledge about it. Yes, credibly. And so I did go down to South Africa. I had a boyfriend for a while who was Cape coloured, which was the designation.
That's what it was called. So just to be clear, that's the terminology that was used at the time. Is that right?
It was the South African terminology for people of mixed race.
Yes.
And they divided the living areas into whites, blacks, and coloureds. And he was from a Cape coloured family. And so I went down to stay with his family, which was completely illegal. I didn't have permission. And if you're going out of I'm white, couldn't not be. And if you're going to stay in an area which is not white, you need to have permission. So that was really interesting. And the family were great. Dad was always a little bit wary because he wasn't used to it. He'd been brought up to not mix. But Mum and the sisters were much more at ease with me being there. But it was really interesting, like going out with Yvonne, one of the daughters, just trying to find somewhere to eat was difficult.
Golly.
And Yvonne told me, don't say anything, because if I spoke, it was quite clear I wasn't coloured because I didn't have a South African accent. Sorry, that's probably not the right way. And so that was an eye-opener. And then I went to Johannesburg and stayed with white people. They were of British descent. And they weren't unkind to their staff, but they were not, respectful to their staff. And it was all really interesting because I came away in the end much more confused from that visit, because I discovered not only was it a black-white thing, or a racial thing, there was poor whites. I hadn't imagined there'd be poor whites. And, this is coming from an idealistic viewpoint from my uninformed days. And religion, huge issue with religion. So South Africa was much more complicated than I actually realized. Very interesting visit. Sorry, so that's a long story.
It's an interesting story, and I'm going to actually put a trigger warning on this for any friends who are Black, Indigenous, people of colour, just to flag that we're having this conversation and that it might be hurtful or painful at some level. So so I just want to acknowledge that. What was your takeaway from that then, Jane? I mean, you said you came away more confused, but what were you then able to take back from that? And did it?
I don't know that I took back anything from it, but seeing, I mean, it didn't change my views.
No,
obviously, no. Not for a moment. In fact, it only enforced those. Yes. I reinforced those. But how complicated things can be, and when you're young and idealistic, you don't actually realize how complicated something is behind an argument that you think is just a straightforward argument that this is wrong.
Yeah,
which it was wrong.
It is wrong, but it's incredible the amount of complexity and complication it throws up at the level, that level of, I'm just going to use the word cruelty, human cruelty, throws up all that kind of complication. It's absolutely remarkable. It's completely unsustainable as a system.
And it didn't sustain.
And it didn't sustain, but actually it does sustain in other ways, right? Actually, it does sustain. It is sustained. So it's really important to flag that as well. It's just not just in South Africa either. All right, so that's a very sobering conversation there. So I just want to take a moment. No, please don't apologize. These things are really important, Jane. These stories get lost. Like that story would get lost otherwise in the ether. And it's a story that's playing out now. It's a story that plays out in the UK still. It's a story that plays out in America still. It's a story that plays out all over the place. And I think it's important for us to honor and acknowledge those conversations, as well, as difficult and as sobering as they are. So I'm going to bring it back now, and it seems strange to kind of elevate the mood again. So I want to hear more about your time in Zambia and what, and you still have friends there, is that right?
Yeah, not from those days, but not in Zambia.
Yes.
Although one friend her family is still there because she is Zambian. And that, well, I still have a lot of friends from those days, and they've gone to different countries, and so that's great. And that was a very useful experience when I came to start my work with what was then RIJ, in having those contacts in various places around the world. But the other thing that I remember it was just getting out and traveling around the nearby countries.
Yes.
And I talked about hitchhiking. I mean, two of us, a friend of mine who I am still friends with, she lives in Italy now, she and I hitched from Zambia to Kenya.
Goodness.
So that took us through Tanzania into Kenya.
What was that experience like?
Brilliant.
What kind of stories did you hear from
brilliant.
the people who gave you?
We had all sorts of odd lifts, and the only one that really sticks in my mind is we got a lift from this Kenyan guy who discovered that Biss, my friend, is Irish. And we ended up following a Guinness truck for a while. Oh my goodness, he kept on about the Guinness truck and Ireland and so on. That was just a very funny experience.
How would you, so Zambia borders with Zimbabwe to the south, is that right? Where else does it border?
Malawi to the east and Tanzania to the northeast. So therefore we went up through the north of Zambia, through Tanzania up to Kenya.
What was
Tanzania's on the coast.
Tanzania's on the coast. Kenya on the coast as well? Yeah,
yes.
I thought so. And what would you say was, I'm just going to choose two, but how would you describe the difference? And Kenya's enormous, isn't it? I always imagine it being massive somehow.
No, it's not that huge.
Oh, isn't it? Okay.
Not like extremely awkward is DRC, the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's a huge country, and that was exactly north of Zambia.
Okay.
And that was a no-go area anyway. It's too dangerous.
Yeah. So what would you typify the difference between Kenya and Zambia?
Kenya then was much more developed.
I see.
I mean, it still had lots to do, but like, for example, the safari parks and so on were all much more organized. And to be honest, for me at that time, I preferred the game parks in Zambia because they were much more natural.
Yes.
But Kenya was very organized, and Nairobi was a dream city. It was very, very beautiful and well organized.
How about the cultures there and the people?
Not so different. Big Swahili Arab influence on the coast of Kenya and so on. So that's a bit
further north.
Yes. Yeah, and trading and so on from the old days. Beautiful old Arab islands like Lamu off the north of Mombasa, which we went to. We did all that. It was great. Zambia is much more of copper and farming, and some very ordinary game parks, very natural game parks, not ordinary really. I suppose those are the main differences then. Yeah.
Wow. And so what happens after Zambia?
I went back to the UK. And
reverse culture shock.
Yes. Okay. Yes, a bit. Yes. And was unemployed for a while. I actually went on the dole as I was trying to adjust to what came next, and then got the job. I did the job in you went through my CV earlier. I got the job in hospital catering, which was very interesting. Hospital management and the NHS, very interesting.
Interesting. Is that a euphemism?
Well, I was rather surprised at how many people were employed in admin and didn't really seem to be necessary. You go into quite a lot of offices and people were not as busy as they could be. Being a bit left of centre politically, I thought that it should be better managed. But huge respect for the NHS. Yeah. Huge respect for them. And that was a very good experience working there. But then I got the job with John Lewis in Milton Keynes. And Milton Keynes was so new then. Yeah. And in fact, I was there for the opening of the city centre and the John Lewis store. Well,
okay, so just to be clear, like Milton Keynes is a new town in the UK, and it was built as a satellite to London, wasn't it? It's near Luton, maybe, or
It's north of Luton.
North of
It's near
Luton.
Bedford.
Yes, near Bedford. And so it's a completely, entirely new town, built in the 60s maybe, or 70s. Oh no, if you were there in the 70s, 80s, no?
Yes, it was built in the 60s, I guess. 70s, I should know. But
anyway, well, so that's what Milton Keynes is. All right.
And it was a great place to be.
Yes.
Because it was new and it was growing, and there was, it's built on satellite communities. And so each community had something new going for it. They were building up, and lots of opportunities to do something, you know, follow your interests. For example, I could go to a pottery workshop and just pot away, and all you had to do was pay for your clay and things, and these sorts of facilities were great. It was a really, I enjoyed my years in Milton Keynes. It's got a terrible reputation.
It has got a terrible reputation, but I didn't. My ex used to live in Bedford, and so we popped to Milton Keynes to go to a shopping centre there or something, and it's actually in very lovely countryside.
Oh, beautiful.
Really lovely countryside. And I understand the idea of a satellite a thing like that, but if you have this kind of you know, what would you call it, that kind of villagey feeling, if one has a kind of village fantasy about, you know, cottages with thatched roofs and stuff like that, then I suppose Milton Keynes just looks a bit boxy.
Yes,
but it's a perfectly good,
and everything looks the same,
and everything looks the same, but why not?
Well, in each area it looks the same. Each area was certainly designed to be different, so they're different from each other. But within that community, yes, you'd have rows of houses.
Terrible snobs as English, aren't we? If it's not some beautiful little chocolate box Cotswoldsy thing, then it's just terrible. It's awful.
But it was interesting. It was built on grids, so you got the grid roads, very much like US cities. And they were planting trees at that time to grow up. And if I go back now and look, those trees actually hide the satellite, the communities there. And so all you're seeing is natural trees and so on. So that was nice. That's what they did. It was on the canal too, which was nice.
Beautiful. So just in that first spell in Zambia, did you meet your husband then? Did you meet Steve in that spell the first time?
Yes,
because we're going to talk about this a little bit, but you cycled back round to him, didn't you, or something?
Yes. I did 2 years as a volunteer, and then the third year I had a job with the National Hotel Corporation, which sounds much grander than it was, as a training officer. And during that third into fourth year, Steve came to Zambia to set up a field office for the volunteers, because as volunteers we were actually responsible to the British Council until then, so he arrived to set up the field office for VSO. So that's how I met him.
Ah, I see. But you didn't marry him that time. You didn't start going out with him at that time.
I didn't marry him then. I went back to UK and married my
first husband,
boyfriend, from college.
Was that when you were in Milton Keynes?
Yes, well, he worked for the Open University.
Okay.
So that's why we're in Milton Keynes.
Ah, and so it's based there, the Open University, and that was radical at the time as well, wasn't it? The Open University.
Yes. Radical, but it was set up
a radical idea. I mean,
yes, it was. It was a radical idea when it was set up, and it was great. It was a bit like socializing. It was almost a bit like sort of a student community, because our social life pretty much revolved around Open University. I was a member of the theatre group. What was it called? Open Theatre Group in the Open University. And that was great. I was always the stage manager. I was always the backstage. I liked that.
Were you quite young when you got married the first time?
I don't know what young is.
Odd question.
What age was I?
Well, I was
26.
Okay, so not super young then. Yeah. Okay. How long were you
married for? How old I was. Pardon?
How long were you married for the first time?
5 years. 4 years. 5 years. 5 years.
Okay.
but we'd been together for many years.
Yes.
We actually lived together when I was at it's called I was in Cardiff.
Yeah, Cardiff in Cardiff at college.
And Nick was the student president of the University Students' Union.
Okay.
In that last year we were in Cardiff.
Yes. Okay, so what happens next then? So you're in Milton Keynes, you're working at the John Lewis, you're married to Nick, and what happens next?
I had itchy feet.
Okay.
I wanted to do something different, and so then I was looking at what to do and what to do next. So I was I say problem in inverted commas, but my itchy feet wasn't necessarily what Nick wanted to do. So I looked around for something. Steve had been to see us, been to visit us and so on, and then had come off to Japan.
Your second husband, Steve, had been to visit you, so he knew you guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then when we split up, I told lots of friends, that's what was happening. And some time later, I got a letter from Japan saying, "Oh, sorry to hear that," telling me about Japan. And I thought, okay, that's different from Africa. Could be my next experience. And so, yeah, then I came here on a visit, 84, February 84, and decided to try this out for a while. Okay. And 36 years later,
here you are in your house that you own by the river in West Tokyo.
I never, so many people you talk to, oh, I never expected to stay.
Oh yeah, me too.
And I never expected to be in a country that was so organized.
You always imagined yourself in somewhere
less developed.
Yeah.
And I still kind of enjoy the element of chaos that I come across when I go visiting less developed areas.
Yeah, interesting. So you come to Japan. What were you doing at first? English teaching, just existing.
Yes, I don't think I was cut out to be an English teacher.
No, me neither. I'm useless.
I'm very thankful that it kept me going for a while.
Yeah, it's a great way to earn a keep and to learn about people and to learn about just to learn about people and to learn about work ethic and to learn about all those kinds of good things.
And you're right, it's a good introduction to Japan and talking to the students and things, or not getting, not finding out about them, depending on how good a teacher you were. But yes, and it was a good introduction, but it was so badly organized. I mean, anybody could become an English teacher. I wasn't a qualified teacher.
Yeah, same.
And so many conversation lounges. It was bubble years, and it was really quite crazy. And what astonished me was the waste in the bubble years.
The bubble years means there was a massive economic bubble in the 80s. It burst in the 90s when Japan was just so ludicrously rich that people could make a fortune here, couldn't they? Like there was so much money. It was based off property, I think, and maybe in development.
Largely, I think.
And export, perhaps.
Yes. Well, car manufacturing, things like that. Well, and tech.
Yes.
Tech products and so on. And I mean, I was shocked that at the rubbish, and I often, a lot of my furniture and stuff from my first flats came out of the rubbish because so much was being thrown out. It was terrible.
Yeah, not so much these days, actually. I remember when I first got here, almost 20 years ago now, there was so much stuff in the rubbish. Sofas, chairs, all kinds of things. TVs,
it's
skis.
much more real now.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It is. Yeah. There's something different, something shifted.
Of course it was real then, but it's makes much more sense now.
Yeah. The many layers of Japan. I'm always discovering more. Are you?
Yes.
I'm constantly discovering more.
Yeah.
I do love it here. So you come to Japan. Do you hook up with Steve straight away? That's quite a direct question.
Well, yeah, he was the only person I knew here. So.
Yes.
So yes.
And how long after that were you married? When
did we get married? I came in 84. we got married in 86.
86. What was it about Steve that attracted you? What did you love about Steve?
He's awkward.
Uh-huh.
And we had good discussions.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know, what do all of us find in our partners? That's a hard thing to answer.
I know, I asked somebody else this recently and they were like, what? And they asked me, what do you like about your husband? I just looked at him, I was like, I just think he's great.
Well, actually, I should say, sorry.
No, but obviously then I went on to unfold that a little bit more, but I just think it's really interesting to hear what it is that people find so, it was awkward.
No,
yeah.
I was being sarcastic. but awkward in terms of the far we'd have discussions.
Yes.
And great discussions.
Obtuse.
Yes.
No. Yeah.
Well, it works both ways, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So great discussions and awkwardness. Love it. All right. So then,
we also had to get married because of visas.
Yes. So I mean that's
to be very practical.
Yes, the same. We had to be very practical about that as well. I mean, I'm sure we would have got wed anyway, but it did accelerate things somewhat.
It hurried it along.
Yeah. Yeah, which is always an issue when you're not.
I was always quite happy not to be married.
Yes.
Because it didn't make any difference to our relationship.
Yes.
But definitely the visa requirement is essential.
That's always an issue for people who aren't living in their home country as well. I think it's really important to
neither of us are in our home country. So.
Yeah, exactly. Very personal question. No kids. Was that a conscious decision?
Yes, I've never.
Would you mind sharing that with us?
Well, mainly because I'm too selfish, I think. I mean, that's my simple answer, because I always want to do things. I want to, if I couldn't have just gone off to visit projects and things, and I always wanted to be doing something else. So I thought if you have children, you should look after them.
I agree.
And I wasn't, I mean, not that you can't look after them, but I wanted more from my life at that point, and I've never regretted the decision.
Yes,
but that was why.
Yes. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I like to ask that question. I mean, we have had a lot of on this series, actually, Jane, we've had a lot of people. We talk about this a lot. We've talked about infertility. We've talked about miscarriage. We talked about birth stories. Talked about infertility and then having babies after being diagnosed with infertility and so on. So, and of course, I also don't have children, and I also didn't want children. And we had a go at one point, but my story is that I went to the doctors as well, and she said, you know what? She goes, I can give you a fertility drug today. It will be 500 yen, which is about $5, and you'll probably be pregnant by next month. Honestly, it was that moment where I was out that door like a cartoon.
That would change my life very, very much too quickly.
Like she literally said, and I was like, it was like one of those cartoons where their feet go, and then there's a little cloud behind them. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, to my husband, we're done with this project now. I'm done.
Well, that's interesting. And the other thing that was interesting when I first came to Japan is I would often be asked. And, I was just surprised how often people said, oh, and you have children? And I'd say no, and they go, oh. So I feel I had to say, well, it's my choice. You don't have to feel sorry for me. And it was always, Japanese friends asking me that, or people I met. But it was quite surprising how often I was asked.
Yeah, I think it's a rich and interesting conversation to have as well, in a way, because it's a way to be in the world, and there's many ways to be in the world. My mum's sister didn't have children, my dad's sister didn't have children, my grandma's sister didn't have children, my grandma's cousin didn't have children. So I've just been surrounded by that as a standard. It's not something I find terribly difficult to fit into my scope of the way there are to lead a life.
My mother didn't like me saying that. She didn't like me saying I didn't want children.
Interesting. What do you think that was about?
She just thought that I was always wanting to be different.
Oh,
I suppose it goes back to the earlier conversation. She just thought I was always wanting to be obtuse and different. And that was and it wasn't an upsetting conversation, but it just fascinated me that why don't you? What's the matter with that?
rights for the childless. I'm kidding.
Yeah, she was quite funny about it.
Yeah, yeah. It is funny, isn't it? I mean, you know, people often say it's the most natural thing in the world, and I'm like, is that true? I don't know. I mean, obviously that we're here to kind of be carriages for our DNA, but
I never had the maternal instinct.
No.
My father was always more on side. I was much closer to my father than to my mother, and he always, it was always easier to tell him what strange views.
Yeah, was he interested in you?
But yeah, I guess so. It was interesting as both. I mean, he never showed neither of them actually showed favoritism. Well, no, not really.
Yes.
No, but he was an artist. He was a funny man and entertaining, so it was much easier to, I think I was probably closer to him than my sister. So if we're going to look at it like that.
Yeah, I was close to my dad, and my brother is close to my mum. I think it's quite normal. It's absolutely natural.
Somebody's got to be, so.
Yeah, it's just quite normal. Yeah. I like that. I think it's really nice when parents are really genuinely interested in their kids, like just really like curious and listening, not for any reason, not to be like, oh, why do you have to be like that? Or, you know, as kind of some kind of ammo later on. It's just really, I really enjoyed having, you know, having a parent be super, super curious in me. You know, genuinely, like, what? Even with naughty things, you know, even things I wasn't supposed to do, still curious about it without judgment. It's such a nice feeling, that is. Love it. Okay, let's move on from that then. So when do you kind of really find your feet in Japan?
Well, I guess when we opened the restaurant, because we had to have our feet here then. That came about because I didn't see myself carrying on teaching. We actually did talk about, if we're going to stay in Japan, we should do something more concrete. If we're not going to, we should look at maybe going to do some work in the development, in aid work or whatever, development work somewhere else. And at some point, the decision came that we would open the restaurant because of my background.
Yes.
And I'd always said I'd never have my own restaurant. But was persuaded, and we did. And so that was an interesting experience, just sort of setting up. It took 2 years basically from having the idea to actually opening the place. Things like, you know, where do you get loans from? Where do you get assistance? This, that, and the other. Very funny looking for loans. You go to a loan company and they'd ask you for collateral, and there were 3 options for collateral. Obviously, premises, land, investments, and the third one was golf club membership. It was bubble time, and golf club memberships were extremely valuable, extremely expensive, and they were considered collateral for loans. We were asked that 3 or 4 times, and of course, you know, really. So that was very interesting. And the other bit of advice we got from one person was go to a bank near your premises, near your shop, your restaurant premises. And that was really nerve-wracking because you had to secure an agreement for the rental of a premises and then go for a loan. And if you didn't get that, you were really kind of stuck. It did work. That's exactly how we did get the loan.
Yeah.
From, what's it, Daiichi Kangyo Bank. I forget which one. That
seems back to front, doesn't it, in a way? But then again, when you live outside of your culture or country of origin, you soon realize that there's no such thing as logic. Yeah. Logic is just it differs depending on the place you are.
That was all part of the learning process and so on. And those loans were interesting because 3 years we had that loan, and then at the end of the 3 years, the deputy bank manager came to the restaurant to see us and said, "Thank you very much, and you've paid blah blah blah. Would you like another one?" We went, "Oh, we weren't thinking of taking another one," but we knew that was probably a good idea if it was on offer, and so we did take another one for 3 years. But then at the end of that 3 years, we did want a loan, and by then they would completely shut down on a lot of the loans going out, and we couldn't get one for love or money.
Gosh. And what was that restaurant then? It was called 1066. What kind of food did you serve there? British food, for example, like shepherd's pie and things like that.
Yes, yes.
Fish and chips. I mean, you are the queen of fish and chips, like the queen.
I've never wanted to be. Yes, I did all sorts of research into British food, which is fascinating, really fascinating. And we set up the restaurant, and we had the menu. We had a changing menu every day to showcase all the delights of British food historically and contemporarily, and so on and so forth. And people were just constantly looking for what they knew. We were asked for shepherd's pie, asked for steak and kidney pie, asked for fish and chips, roast beef. And if we say, well, we're happy to do that, just, make the booking and say that's what your request is. But that wasn't reassuring enough for people. They wanted to know they could turn up and expect something typically British. And in the end, we had those 4 staples on every day.
Yeah.
With some specials on. And I suppose as time went on, it kind of lost its fascination for me, who did most cooking, because Steve actually had to carry on teaching because we couldn't get a visa. He was still involved in the restaurant, but not as full-time as I was. And so, yeah, it lost its sort of sparkle in, showcasing the best of British food when it was what I thought ordinary British food. But it was brilliant experience. Having the restaurant, yeah.
And that's why you started to build your network up, is it? So you're involved in, like, there was a British club, British council, British, I suppose you had connections with the embassy and things like that as a result of having that.
And doing catering work. And so, yes, doing a lot of catering work for those different organizations, and meeting people that, well, we wouldn't have met just by socializing and so on.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that's absolutely marvelous in Tokyo, is the networks are so well connected, aren't they? And I think it's an interesting I suppose one could use the word expat experience here, which is different to other places. It seems quite democratic in a way, like you end up knowing people from all across the span of life, I think, which is slightly different to, say, somewhere like Hong Kong or Shanghai or something like that, where I think it's a lot more layered than that. I know all kinds of people.
Yeah, and very spread out, whereas those places that you've mentioned are much more, you've got that community.
Yes.
That British community.
Yes.
Whereas here, apart from anything else, so many nationalities in terms of foreigners here. So and there isn't the British background or the American, well, not to the same extent. And yes, we did meet a huge cross section of people, but it still surprises me to meet and come across Brits in completely different areas and who've been here a long time, and how come we never knew them?
Yes.
I mean, that's just so arrogant. But
I feel like that as well.
Such a kind of surprise.
Well, we both
lovely surprise, yes.
And these days we both kind of retreated into the countryside a little bit as well, haven't we? So yeah. I don't suppose we're as well connected now, and we're very, locally focused too. So when did that close down?
The year 2000.
So 20 years almost. Yeah. Oh, it's 20 years?
20 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. We did it for 12 years, basically.
12 years. Okay. So the year 2000. And what was the final kind of straw that broke the camel's back there?
Just wanted to change.
You just wanted to change.
I always wanted to change. But a fantastic experience running the restaurant. There's the famous Rolling Stones story.
I think you may have told me this, but come on, tell me again.
Well, it was actually in that first year, I think. We had a phone call from Tokyo Dome saying, can you make shepherd's pie? I went, yeah. Can you make shepherd's pie for 60? Yeah. And so they booked us to do catering for the dressing room area of the Rolling Stones Steel Wheels tour, because Keith Richards' favourite food is shepherd's pie. And so it was a fascinating experience, because there was so much fuss about the shepherd's pie over and above the rest of the buffet that we served, because he held up a concert once in Canada. Because people had eaten all the shepherd's pie, and he held the concert up for an hour. He was throwing one of his tantrums.
Did you meet them?
Well, I saw them. Talked to a couple of them. Keith Richards came up and looked at the shepherd's pie, and he said, looked to me and said, "Quite important, was it?" I said, "Yeah, well, I understand you want that." He said, "I'm not eating any today." And he went off and played billiards.
Oh dear, there's so many stories like this. I don't know, there's something about Tokyo where you get to be connected to just about everything.
I know, very bizarre. Well, I mean, you'd never have that opportunity if you did a restaurant. Well,
you might, but yeah.
We also did shepherd's pie for Eric Clapton. Didn't meet him though. They came. It was a takeout.
He's huge here, isn't he? Like huge.
Yeah.
Beloved.
Yeah.
He's beloved here. Yes.
Yeah. I'm more of a fan of Eric Clapton music than I am the Rolling Stones, so that was interesting.
I like the Rolling Stones better. Yeah. Oh, what's the singer's name?
Mick Jagger.
Young Mick Jagger. Any day of the week. Lovely. Okay. So when did you start doing the Fuji Rock Festival?
Was it the very first time? The very first festival. So was it 96? I forget.
96?
The very first Fuji Rock Festival.
So you started while you, because it's called 1066, your stall, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the Fuji Rock Festival is basically like the Glastonbury of Japan. It's fantastic, and there's like a world food like area there. There's the normal kind of, there's a massive food area where all the Japanese food is, and then there's the world food area. And Jane has a fish and chip. I worked there one year. Just making so many fish and chips.
Awful, isn't it?
Oh, it's disgusting. I mean, I'd say it was fun, but it was really disgusting, and especially when it rains. But it was a fantastic experience. But you do this every year, didn't you? You started this when you were 45, right? I think that's what you told me, because I can remember being there being like, "Oh my God, I'm so tired, I hate doing this." And then I was like, "How old were you when you started this?" And she goes, 45. And I was like,
in my 60s.
I'm 45 now and it's just too hard. Such a baby.
Yes.
I don't think I complained that much while I was there, did I?
No.
I had a great deal of fun, but yeah, afterwards I was like, I don't think I'll do this again.
Well, you were very determined to do it with your scarf.
That's right. I had a little kind of like Hilda Ogden scarf and a red lip every day.
Which you did.
Yeah, and I did. I showed
got a picture of it.
Yeah, and I think I did a fantastic job. Well, I am the British Business Awards best dressed, Jane. So I think it's worth noting that.
Yes. Yes. And I'll send the picture through to them.
Thank you. So that came about because you have a friend who has an Ethiopian restaurant, is that right? And he's
Solomon was friends with the Shacha president of the promoters, and so he asked Solomon to set up this world restaurant area. So that's how I got involved in it.
Yes.
Over the years, he and I have brought in different restaurants. It's not a world restaurant area. It's not called that anymore.
No.
The last 2 years. Obviously it hasn't happened this year, but the previous 2 years it's called Blue Galaxy now.
Blue Galaxy. Okay.
That area. But yes, we are in an area which is kind of nicely away from the main food area, the big food area. It is extremely hard work. Long hours, very hard work. And
oh my God, such hard work.
And so much frying and fat and and grease.
And you're just on your feet. I mean, I can remember standing there and maybe 2 hours on the fryer. And I know at the time I was kind of, I think I was 3 years into my business at the time. So I was still just doing that thing where I was going flat out, doing anything I could, and hadn't started to kind of to rationalize it. And so I'd been working so hard, and I could not wait to get into the mountains because it's on a ski resort, and just use my hands and do something with my hands. So I didn't want to be customer facing, although that's kind of one of I used to run pubs when I was younger, and I was I really enjoy that kind of engagement and looking after people and making them feel really good and stuff like that. But I was like, put me behind the fryer. I don't want to talk to people at all. Oh my God, 2 or 3 hours on that. Just all you're doing is you're just getting fish, thinging it in batter, putting it in the fryer, getting it out. People are shouting at you, "I need more fish." And there's chips on the other side. and then at some point your legs just start to burn.
Yes.
But it's quick. It's not a slow thing. It's not like, oh, I'm starting to feel a bit achy. It's like, all right, I'm out. I'm done. I need to sit down.
And
who's taking over?
You go through stages too.
Yeah.
You know, you get really tired, and then you suddenly get second wind.
Yeah.
And it all makes. I mean, but it's atrocious conditions. And
union.
My final thesis at college was trade unions in the catering business. So just if you look at what the conditions.
Oh my God.
I'd be in terrible trouble.
Yeah. I know.
But it's 3 days though.
Food hygiene as well, like, was massive. I worked for Bass Taverns when I was doing the pubs, and they were so strict and stringent about like keeping your cellar clean and everything, and like food hygiene and stuff like that. They were actually a brilliant company to work for. I learned so much, and yeah, it's just wild, isn't it? But the thing is, when you're frying things in like, I don't know, 10,000 degree fat, you are not fine. The hygiene is 100% fine, and you're serving alcohol. People would come in for breakfasts and they just get on the pints straight away, 8
gin
o'clock.
Gin and tonic for breakfast.
Yeah, unbelievable. So it was gin and tonic, there was ale, all this kind of stuff. It's such good fun. I saw Bjork. Oh yeah. So it's good fun.
And after so many years of doing it, you know, the characters who run it are, you know, old mates. It's great to see them.
Yeah. Oh, my hat's off to you for that, Jane, because that's an undertaking, and you have to drive this massive van, don't you, full of all the stuff.
Freezer truck, yes.
The freezer truck.
It's great. I like driving that. Actually.
Yeah.
You feel as if you've got something really strong under you.
Yeah, like really powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, you look. I just imagine you going down the motorway there and people going past you like doing a double take, seeing this like.
It's like you see the trucks going around here and you think, oh, it's a woman driver, gosh.
Yeah, then add to that you're not Japanese, and add to that you're a bit older as well. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what?
Yes, she's weird.
Oh well, yeah, that's a given. We're in good company here, aren't we? So that's what's the best act you've seen at Fuji Rock, or do you have a year that stands out? Obviously, the year I was there.
Well, definitely. Definitely.
Do you have any years that really stand out for you, like as being absolutely fantastic years, or what was the best act you've seen there?
I have not recently been to see many of the acts, because half of them I don't know.
Yes.
The team try to educate me a bit on the music to go and listen to, and also there's a friend who comes every year, and he's always looking at. He comes to hear and see new bands and so on. And so he's always telling me, but I can't remember. I did go to see Bjork. I didn't think she was so exciting. But the one that does stand out for me was the year that the Sierra Leone Refugee All-Stars came.
Okay.
And I was really keen to meet them. They're refugees from Sierra Leone conflict, and they'd set up the band while they were in a refugee camp and so on, and I met them and loved them, and we had long chats and so on. So I think that stands out for me more than actually seeing a great band. I'm always a little bit disappointed in some of the stage acts. You know, I remember going to Hyde Park concerts and the Isle of Wight concert all those years ago, and the staging was always quite exciting.
Yes.
And so I find that one or two of them are good, but generally, you know,
they just walk on, play, and then they go off, and there's no
so the fans that know about the music, that's great for them.
Yes,
because I don't know about it. So it's more the characters that I meet and come to the stall year in, year out.
Yeah,
from all sorts of places: Taiwan, Hong Kong, mostly those two countries in terms of, you know, visitors. Yes. Apart from Japanese people.
What was that band called again? The Sierra Leone
Refugee All-Stars.
The Sierra Leone Refugee All-Stars. Oh, I might look those up.
Yeah, good.
Do they have a website? Nice, but they've got YouTube channels.
I'm sure, yeah, well, I'm sure I've listened to them there. Yeah.
Please look them up, listeners. So let's move on then. So this is a nice segue into, you know, what we're going to talk about, bringing us into the modern day, the current times, which is formerly known as Refugees International Japan, now known as, you say it,
Refugee Empowerment International.
I've got to get that to flow off my tongue.
I'm still practicing that.
Yes, because I'm going to just call it Ray.
We're actually trying to, well, as far as possible, use the name. Also we're saying REI generally.
Yes.
Because somebody supporting from another country wouldn't read it as Ray.
Oh no, they wouldn't. They'd say Ree, wouldn't they?
We wouldn't read that syllabary in the same way. But it's fine. Whatever, either way, it's
okay.
Fine. But the reason for changing the name is to give a better message. So therefore, as far as possible, use the full name.
Yes, Refugees Empowerment International.
So you know,
how did you get involved in this then, Jane? And what's it all about? Can you tell us all about it and what the ethos is and so on? As I said earlier, I'm on the board of directors of this, and I support it because of the way we work. And and Jane is such an incredible. Oh, I'm feeling emotional. Every single session, I have an emotional outburst. Jane's such an incredible. I wouldn't say lead. It's more like, how would you describe yourself? It's like you're the fertilizer or something like that. The
enjoying this.
The soil, the
instigator.
Instigator,
yes. Initiator.
Yes. That's
motivator.
All, the motivator. But
I don't know.
What's your title?
Executive Director.
Executive Director of Refugees Empowerment International. But you're very much the face of it, but also you're very much in the background, and that's very important for us, I think, as well, because the stars of the whole thing must be the people who receive
the beneficiaries.
The beneficiaries of it. They are unbelievably incredible people. Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible thing to be displaced and have nothing, and it's essential that we provide financial aid to people so that they can decide what to do with it.
Yes.
So please tell us more about it.
Well, I got involved because I knew people who were working in what was then RIJ, and they'd asked me to be part of it. But I had a restaurant. I had 2 restaurants at one point during that time, but I closed the restaurant, and a friend asked me if I would join, and I had only seen their very, very successful fancy social events, fundraising events, and it's not what I wanted to do. But they actually wanted somebody to do the grants, the project funding, choose the projects, follow them, assess them, and report back and so on. And that was right up my street. That was exactly, you know, my area of interest, and as it turned out, a few contacts as well. So I joined as a volunteer. I still had the catering business, but I joined as a volunteer on the project management, and that changed over the years because obviously I picked up projects that were already being funded and so on, and started to go and visit the projects, which my predecessors hadn't been doing for very good reasons, because they had other commitments that they couldn't do that. And listening to the beneficiaries, possible new projects and so on, and listening to what they could do, what they wanted, was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I've been involved in various organizations, social issues or aid or whatever, but I didn't really know very much about the refugee world directly. And so it was all a bit of a learning process for me, but fascinating and amazing. I was so impressed, and I could see that just giving something for today was not what they wanted. No. It wasn't they, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be saying they, but it was not what people wanted. People want to build a normal life. They want to be normal.
Yeah,
they want the same things that we want.
Yes, exactly.
Really not any more demanding than that. And
their highest dream is to go home. Is that right?
Definitely.
And to be close to home if they possibly can.
Yes.
If people possibly can, the same as anybody.
Out of what is now 80 million people, the number of people that are looking to go to another country is very small. The majority of them want to stay where they are, and with the hope of going home. So they want to stay within their own culture, in circumstances that are familiar.
Language.
Yes.
Very simply.
Language and culture and so on. And so it was a fascinating introduction to a world that is completely misunderstood.
Completely misunderstood. Jane, can you just give me what your definition of a refugee is? Somebody who's, how do we typify that?
It displaced from home by conflict, persecution, belonging to the wrong ethnic group.
So
that kind of
displaced from home, and that, yeah, okay, conflict.
Actually, in the true definition of it, conflict is not there. We've always assumed it is.
Yes.
And it was highlighted for me a while ago that actually that word is not there, but we all accept that as
meaning
part of
war.
it.
Yes.
But persecution is what comes out of the war, and in danger of your life.
Yeah, because nobody wants to up sticks and leave their home. The end.
And it's not what people confuse as migrants who are choosing to go somewhere else. Refugees don't have that choice.
Yes.
And we also, there's two definitions. Refugees have fled over a border. And the other definition is IDP, internally displaced people.
Right.
So they are the same as refugees, but still in their own country. Mm-hmm. So we fund both refugees and IDP projects.
So
and returnees sometimes.
And returnees, so that they can be helped to build themselves, rebuild. There's a beautiful story of is it a baker in Africa?
Oh, Bizimana. Yeah. Yes, he's one of our favorites.
And now he trains other people to be entrepreneurs, is that right? Or is he just
he's got his own business, and he employs
that's right,
people into his business. And he also does environmental activities with the children in the area that he lives in. He gets them collecting up the plastic bottles and showing how to build walls with them by filling all sorts of stuff. He does amazing.
Yeah, amazing.
He's also a musician, and he's done a video and got
what an incredible person. So I would like to know, where are our projects and what do they focus on?
Currently, we're featuring 5 projects that we are raising funds for. 2 on the Thai-Myanmar border and 1 inside Myanmar, in Karen State.
So that's IDP?
Yes. Lebanon, which is Syrian refugees, and Nairobi, which is the entrepreneur refugees who are in urban environment, not in camps.
So in Nairobi, then, that's an entrepreneurial project, is it, to help people to start businesses?
Yes.
Or support people to start their businesses? So it's financial support, and we don't send anybody on the ground out there. We just offer financial support and they are self-managed.
And the host community. Promoting integration in the host community is very important. I mean, refugees have fled where they're not welcome, and they end up places they're not always very welcome.
Yeah.
So building that integration and understanding is very important to the making the best of the situation. What do we know? We don't go out there and do it.
Yeah, we don't.
Because A, we don't know the culture. B, maybe we're not as clever as they are.
I was going to say, we're not inherently cleverer, better, more skilled, or any of those things.
Not at all.
Apart from the places where we might be, but that's it.
And a big buzzword these days is sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Sustainability. And interestingly, I remember rewriting our funding criteria about 12 years ago. And that word sustainable was in our funding criteria, because the reason it's there is because the projects must continue beyond our funding.
Yes.
That there must be something that's going to go on. We want to know what happens afterwards.
Yes.
And mostly it's that the participants themselves, the beneficiaries, have gained something, obviously, but they are then able to put something back into the community and go on to do bigger and better things.
Yeah.
So that's a very important part. If it's managed and owned by the community, there is much more chance of sustainability.
Love it. And I love that phrase, like, what do we know? Like, that is just it's the crux of it's the crux and the backbone, because what do we know? We are not going in there to be like, hey guys, and get our photos taken, and it's just gross, isn't it? Some of the stuff that happens
out
there. No. What was I going to say? So the Myanmar border, one of those is addiction. Is that right?
Yes. So, amazing program. Obviously, Myanmar's the highest producer of methamphetamines in the world.
I did not know that.
And the second highest producer of opium. So there's a lot of stuff around there. And obviously, the refugee communities are vulnerable, and it's a way of controlling them. So this addiction program is amazing, and it uses all natural treatment, acupuncture, yoga, water immersion. That's an interesting one, and natural herbs. And so they see a much higher success rate than the average addiction program. It's also residential. So, and
it's run by the refugees. Yes, by the refugees. Yes.
All the people involved in, or one or two ties, one or two people from the host community. It's not just the results from that program, but it's the community work they do. And so a huge number of people who've been through the treatment go on to be community workers, to spread information, to work with their peers, schools as well, teenagers, and so on. And just a brilliant program.
Yeah. And what's the Lebanese one?
That's a kindergarten.
Yeah.
Lebanon has so many problems, as I'm sure lots of people know, with the recent issues with the explosions, but also their government and so on is having trouble. But in addition to that, a quarter of the population is a refugee. It's a small country and next door to Syria, so a huge. And before that, there was quite a sizable Palestinian population. Yeah. So the refugee situation is tough, and therefore, because of that size population, the services, the facilities are overwhelmed, and that covers schools. So for the Syrian children to get into the schools, it's quite tough. So this kindergarten and the group that we support there, they have several kindergartens. They are preparing the children for getting into the elementary schools. And so it's giving important education. It's the psychosocial side is allowing the children to recover and attending to their sort of the effects of the trauma. And also it gives parents time out, yes, you know, and if they need to work or whatever. So there's all sorts of sides to that, which a kind of normal part of education. But in addition, it prepares them for entry into the schools. And 97% of the children get into elementary school.
Oh, that's a nice story. So where are we at now? So I'm going to just pull back from I actually consider those people to be my clients.
Yeah.
Yeah. And pull back into the kind of the business end of it at this end. So recently we've just, we were very generously supported by a big petrol company here, weren't we? And we had space from them. They recently had an M&A, a merger and acquisition. So one of the things that happened was that space is not available to us anymore, right?
Yep.
So currently we're looking for a new space to have our office in or something like that. You're also looking to start to find other people to partner with, is that right? So can you tell me kind of where we are at the moment and what our needs are as an organisation?
Well, I need the money.
I'm going to drop a link. I'm going to drop a link in below here so that if you are called to, you know, purchase a gift for a friend or something like that, because goodness knows we've got enough stuff. There is a way to become a friend of Refugees Empowerment International. It's not rolling off my tongue yet, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Yes. Refugees Empowerment International. It's a lovely way to gift to a friend, and also you can see the results on our website of what's happening in the kindergartens and how fabulous our clients are, our recipients are. So money.
Yeah, of course, we always need money. We're a fundraising group.
Yes.
We've learned through the COVID situation that we don't actually need a 5-day-a-week office space. It would be great to have somewhere we can meet once or twice a week. So that, but particularly storage, because we do have some store some items that we will need to store somewhere. Probably storage wise, you know, a 2-mat room would be adequate for storage.
2-mat meaning?
Tatami mat.
2 tatami mats. So that's about what? 2 by 4 meters or
yes,
something like
yes.
that. Really
I mean,
small.
but basically we don't have a lot, but we do need a storage space that we have access to.
Yeah.
And then it would be great if somebody has a room that's going spare in the office that we could become our office and with enough space to store. That would be the ideal situation.
Yes.
So that's what we're looking for.
And that's a direct call out, by the way. I'm going to make this a direct call out. If you are part of a company who can donate a small space to Refugees Empowerment International, getting better, yay, yeah, please get in touch. And
you would obviously, you get logos and recognition and so on for that. We just received authorization, certification is the better word, for donor tax exemption. So from the end of this month, anybody donating to us can get tax exemption if they'd like to claim that, which we hope would be good for corporates, particularly. And so we would be pleased to come and talk to companies. That's what we'd love to do, is to be able to talk to more and more people about what we do. I mean, it's an issue which is not well understood in Japan, the refugees, you can't see them and so on. But we would love people to hear more about us and understand that you can make an impact very easily.
Yeah.
With a small amount. I mean, even a monthly donor, just a few thousand yen out of your pay every month, it goes a long way. So that kind of thing is what we're really emphasizing at the moment as a means to get involved. We're always looking for volunteers who are keen to organize events and you know, organize their own campaigns, and there've been some really good ones on that.
Yeah.
Those are the main areas that we are really. And
how about for you, Jane? What
about
yes, for you inside for you yourself?
Thank you for reminding me.
You're welcome.
In your question.
No.
I would love to work with somebody on a more permanent basis with a new look on it. I mean, I love what I'm doing, but I've been doing it for quite a long time, and I think it needs new eyes. And a new approach, and I'd love to work with somebody so that we do a kind of job share, and somebody, great opportunity to get experience of all sorts of things to do with the aid world, impact, sustainability, understanding resilience, all sorts of things to learn from our work. And it's a huge area of learning. There is that, Jane, and that's the phase, but on the back end as well. Because it will not be a highly paid position, that's that. But you also get to be in contact with and influence the board of directors. And those people who are on the board of directors are all pretty smart, interesting business people who have a perspective. You get to look at financials, look at spreadsheets, learn about like where money goes and how all this, so you're actually getting to learn business. You're getting to learn how to sit in a room of board of directors. You're getting to learn how people behave in the corporate world, so a level of diplomacy, and you're getting to network as well. So I want to really make it clear that a position like this is excellent for your personal and self-development, because there has to be a call to action for that person to understand that too. I think there's what's in it for you. And as a small organization, the opportunities are huge. Yeah, because you'll learn everything about it. And there's no bureaucracy. You know, going back to my years in as a volunteer in Zambia, I had opportunities at the age of 22 or 23 that very few people have. And I took those opportunities, and I've never regretted it since. And I think that's what we're in a position to do now. The interns and volunteers who work with us, fascinating, such a wide variety of people, and they are there to take the opportunity. If they don't make the most of those opportunities, they're losing out on you know what they're doing. And fascinating group of people and such a variety of skills. Amazing. So Jane, I'd like to start to wrap up now.
We've got a visitor as well. Should we let him in? Let her in. Hello. Hi, kitty cat. Cat's just come in. How nice. Oh, so this is a lovely way to kind of say, what does the future hold for you then? What's coming next? This is your little family. You live here with you live in this beautiful house in the country, literally next to the river. I can see the river almost from this seat. It's the most beautiful place. What does the future hold for you? What's your...
I would like to maybe work a little bit less so that I can spend more time on the house and the garden. And I've got a pottery wheel in the entrance, which I have not put to use for a long time, and lots of things like that I would just love to have the time to be in the country. And be that, well, an old hippie.
And any final words of wisdom, or anything about your philosophy of life, or what would you, in the many ways that there are to lead a life, what would you, an old hippie... I'm looking at all your necklaces up there and I'm like, that's exactly right. What any parting words for us, Jane, or just for me?
I've had such a variety of experiences, the opportunity to, and just being a foreigner, you meet so many different people, and the experiences of meeting such a variety of people is brilliant. And take the opportunity, use the opportunity. I think it's really important.
So just any opportunities, just use them?
Well, I suppose it depends what they might
be. The opportunity
is. But yeah, I mean, yes, make the most of good opportunities. And I mean, even in the time of a pandemic, find what there is good in life. I mean, it's great, isn't it? And people are great, generally.
Yeah, people are great generally, you're right. And thanks, Jane. That was really fascinating. What an amazing trip through the last 60+ years. I know we wouldn't ever know it. Our friend thinks that we look alike, and our friend's daughter, 4-year-old daughter, took my head in her hands the other week and said, Sarah, you look like Jane. I was like, yes.
Poor Sarah.
Not
I've
at
got
all.
A lot of years on Sarah.
I can't. Well, if I'm as full of life, and I mean, you move more easily than I do. So I'll be very, very happy indeed. But thank you, Jane. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to this incredible story from the coast of the south of England to the river side of Japan, and everything that's happened in the middle. There are many ways to lead a life. This is one of them, and everybody has stories, and I want to tell them. And please, if you know somebody whose stories you would love to hear, let me know. I don't want these stories to get lost anywhere, and I want to keep telling them. So thank you so much from Sarah Faruya. And Jane, where can we find you?
You mean on
the interwebs?
At rei-mpo.org.
Thank you very much, and we'll link to that as well. Thank you, everybody, for listening.